The beeping of Grandma's heart monitor was more familiar to me than my morning alarm. Every night for nearly a year, I had the same routine: check her meds, warm her tea, and sit beside her as she slowly drifted off. I was 26 and technically unemployed, having left my marketing job after Grandma's third fall that winter. My parents were supportive, but they lived out of state, and everyone agreed Grandma needed someone physically with her. That someone became me. Her house smelled like lavender and old books, and I'd grown to love it. I'd grown to love her too deeper than before. She wasn't just Grandma anymore. She was a woman with stories, regrets, and stubborn pride. Some nights she'd confuse me for my mother, then laugh it off the next morning over pancakes. I learned her rhythms, her softness, and her sharpness too. Taking care of her wasn't a burden, it felt like purpose. But my cousin Brianna, she popped in twice. Once in July with a bouquet of hydrangeas and again on Thanksgiving. Dressed like she came from a photo shoot, posing beside Grandma for exactly one Instagram story. That was it. No medicine runs, no overnight stays, not even a phone call on Grandma's tougher days. She was busy with her new fiancé, her new apartment, her influencer glow up. Still, Grandma adored her. She'd smile at her photos, comment on her posts, and tell stories that conveniently skipped the part where Brianna stopped visiting. After she left for college, I didn't say much. I just tucked her in, massaged her aching legs, and picked up groceries between job interviews. I rarely made it to. December came fast. The house sparkled with soft Christmas lights, and I spent hours making the living room cozy, fake fireplace and all. Grandma's health had been touch and go lately, and her memory slipped more often than not. I'd noticed her staring off, her eyes glossy, like she was trying to grab onto something that kept fading away. I kept holding on, hoping I could anchor her. She gave me a jewelry box a week, said she wanted me to have it early before she forgot. Inside were tiny memories: her wedding ring, a locket with my baby picture, and a charm bracelet I made her when I was 9. I cried, hugged her, and thought this means something. But 2 weeks later, Grandma passed in her sleep. Peaceful, serene. I was the one who found her. I was the one who made the calls, chose her dress, arranged the service. I kept thinking about the jewelry box, about her voice telling me, "These are yours now." The will was read just after New Year's, and that's when everything changed. The lawyer's office was small, tucked between a dry cleaner and a dentist, but it felt like a courtroom that day. I sat in the corner, hands knotted in my lap, wearing the same black coat I'd worn at Grandma's funeral. Mom and Dad sat beside me, trying to act neutral, but I could tell Dad was tense. Brianna strolled in 10 minutes late, latte in hand, sunglasses still on. Like this was some brunch meeting she forgot she RSVP'd to. She didn't even look at me, just blew a kiss to the lawyer, Uncle Marty. She called him like they were old friends. "Let's begin," he said gently, shuffling papers. My heart pounded as he read the will out loud. I expected something simple. Grandma didn't have a lot, just the house, a small amount of savings, and the jewelry I thought she had already given me. "To my beloved granddaughter Natalie," Marty read. "Thank you for your care, for your kindness, and for your company. I leave you my cookbook collection and the antique tea set that once belonged to my mother." I blinked. That was it. No mention of the jewelry, the box she gave me. Then Marty continued, "To Brianna, my stylish, vibrant girl, I leave my jewelry collection, with the hope that every piece reminds you to carry our family legacy forward with grace and strength." I didn't breathe. I couldn't. My ears rang. The rest was a blur: some money to a church, a donation to a local charity, the house to my parents, which I'd expected. But the jewelry, the ring, the locket, the bracelet, it was all Brianna's. Now, I felt the walls closing. I looked at my parents, but they both avoided my eyes. Marty asked if there were any questions. I stood up slowly and asked, "What about the jewelry box Grandma gave me before she passed?" Marty tilted his head. "Do you have it?" I nodded. Double quotes, then legally, if it was gifted prior to her death, it's yours unless contested. Brianna snapped her head toward me. "She gave you a box." "She did. A week before she passed." "Did she say what was inside was meant for you?" I hesitated. "She said, 'These are yours now.'" Marty nodded. "If Natalie has possession, and there's no mention of that specific box in the will, it could be considered a valid inter vivos gift." Brianna's jaw tightened. "I'll be contesting that." Of course she would. The room emptied slowly. Outside, the January wind whipped around us like punishment. Brianna pulled me aside, lowering her voice. "You've always been good at playing nurse. You think that makes you deserving? You didn't know her like I did." I looked at her, lashes too long, foundation too thick, sympathy too fake, and said nothing. She left in a luxury SUV. I drove home in my battered Honda, hands shaking on the wheel. That night, I opened the jewelry box again, sitting on Grandma's bed, still unmade from the day she left it. I traced the locket, the bracelet. My name wasn't engraved, But my heart was. Then my phone lit up a legal notice. Brianna had officially filed, and this time, I wasn't sure if love would be enough to hold on to what I'd been given. I didn't sleep that night. The house felt colder without her, and every creak of the wooden floorboards sounded like her cane tapping across the living room. I stayed in her room, curled beneath the afghan she crocheted for me during my college finals, clutching the jewelry box like it held her last heartbeat. I didn't want the jewelry because of its worth. I wanted it because she wore those pieces while making Sunday pancakes, while watching Jeopardy in her robe, while holding my hand during hard days. Those trinkets weren't about legacy or luxury, they were memories pressed into metal. The next morning, Mom called. "Brianna's serious," she said. Tone pinched. "She's already retained counsel. She says Grandma told her she'd get the jewelry, but she didn't even visit," I said, my voice cracking. "I know, Nat. I know." I didn't ask for Mom or Dad to take sides, but the silence between us said enough. They were trying to stay neutral, to avoid family drama. Meanwhile, I felt like I was fighting to preserve the last real bond I had left. I went to the attic and started digging through Grandma's boxes. Maybe there was something, written something, in her diaries or old letters. She was old-fashioned like that. I found photo albums, receipts from the 70s, old greeting cards. Then, in a dusty floral box, I found a birthday card addressed to me in her shaky handwriting. Inside it read, "Natalie, the locket and the bracelet were my mother's. I want you to wear them on your wedding day. You've given me so much more than time. You gave me dignity. These are yours now. Love always, Grandma." I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. There it was, proof not just of possession, but of her intent. She wanted me to have them. She saw me. She remembered. She cared. I scanned the card and forwarded it to the lawyer I'd just hired the day before. I didn't want to fight Brianna, but if she was dragging me into this mess, I needed to be ready. Days passed, then weeks. Legal letters went back and forth. It was exhausting, trying to grieve while defending my relationship with a woman no longer here to speak on my behalf. Every time I opened social media, Brianna was posting old photos with Grandma captioned with hearts and poetic quotes, like she'd been some loyal companion rather than a holiday-only relative. One afternoon, I got a message from Brianna. "Brianna, if you really cared about Grandma, you let this go. You're turning grief into a courtroom drama." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back, "Me, if you really cared, you'd have been here when she forgot her name in the middle of the night. You'd have fed her meds when she couldn't swallow. You'd know her favorite mug wasn't the fancy china you posed, but it was a chipped one with daisies." No reply. A week later, I got the court date, March 17th. The irony. Grandma's birthday. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to fight. But I couldn't walk away from this. Not when I'd sat by her side for every appointment. Every night she cried because she couldn't remember what year it was. Grandma gave me more than jewelry. She gave me the kind of love that's rare, quiet, constant, and unconditional. If Brianna wanted to turn that love into a courtroom battle, then so be it. I'd be ready. The days leading up to the hearing felt like moving through molasses. Everything slowed down. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't sleep through the night. Every minute dragged with a heavy ache. This wasn't how love was supposed to be remembered. I spent my evenings reviewing everything, Grandma's card, the receipts I found tucked in her recipe books, even photos of her wearing the locket and bracelet over the years. In every single picture, her eyes smiled the same way they did when she looked at me. Meanwhile, Brianna was building a fantasy. Her lawyer claimed the jewelry was promised verbally during a Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago, which was interesting because that year, she showed up 3 hours late and left early to catch a sale at Macy's. But the court didn't know that. They didn't know how she'd forgotten Grandma's birthday 3 years in a row, or how she'd once asked me if I thought old people should be in homes once they start smelling funny. Still, this wasn't about character. It was about facts. And I had one, a handwritten note, signed and dated, addressed to me, the morning of the hearing. I wore Grandma's favorite scarf around my neck, the burgundy one with tiny sunflowers she used to wear in her garden. It still smelled faintly like her, lavender and earth. I clutched the letter inside my coat pocket like armor. Brianna arrived in a pale pink suit with matching heels and a crocodile handbag that I was pretty sure cost more than 3 months of my rent. She smiled politely at me as if we were strangers meeting in line for coffee. That hurt more than I expected. The hearing wasn't long. The judge was direct. He reviewed the will, acknowledged the ambiguity over the jewelry, and gave both sides a chance to present additional evidence. My lawyer passed the birthday card forward, now sealed in a plastic protector. The judge read it slowly, twice. "Is this your grandmother's handwriting?" he asked me. "Yes, sir," I replied, keeping my voice even. "It was found in a sealed card in her attic. It's dated and the contents clearly state her intent. Brianna's lawyer objected. It wasn't part of the official will, he argued. But the judge raised a hand. It's not uncommon for older individuals to leave informal instructions in addition to their will, he said. And this seems heartfelt, intentional, especially given the nature of the items in question. Brianna didn't speak. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, but her expression never changed. Just polite, detached. I wanted her to fight for it if she really believed she deserved it, but she didn't. She just looked bored, as if this whole mess was a mild inconvenience on her way to a yoga retreat. When the judge ruled in my favor, I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. It wasn't about winning. It was about protecting something sacred, Grandma's trust. Her love, her memory. Outside the courthouse, Brianna stopped me. I hope you're happy, she said. I stared at her. I'm not. I wish we didn't have to go through this. I wish you had been there, not just for the jewelry but for her. She rolled her eyes and walked away. I didn't chase her. That night, I lit a candle in Grandma's room. I placed a locket on her nightstand and sat in her armchair. For the first time in weeks, I felt peace. I knew she'd be proud, not because I got the jewelry, but because I stood up for what mattered. Love, loyalty, truth. The days after the court ruling passed quietly, but the silence was a strange kind of loud. The kind that echoed in corners where love used to live. Grandma's house felt both full and empty, like it had been waiting for something to end. And now that it had, it didn't quite know what to do with itself. I stayed there every night that week, just to make sure everything felt right again. I dusted her piano, rewound her cuckoo clock, brewed her favorite cinnamon tea. I even sat in her recliner, reading one of her worn-down Agatha Christie books aloud. Like I used to when her eyesight got bad. I paused at the funny parts, and imagine her chuckling, her voice raspy and warm. Oh, that Poirot thinks he's so clever. And sometimes when the light hit the window just right, I swear I saw her, just a blur of her shawl, the faintest trace of her perfume, or the sound of her humming in the kitchen. One afternoon, as I was organizing some of her photo albums, I found an envelope labeled for after I'm gone. Inside, there was a short letter in her handwriting. Emma, my sunshine. Thank you for loving me when I needed it most. Life isn't always fair, but kindness is its own kind of inheritance. Use my things with joy, not bitterness, and always keep your heart open. Love? Grandma. That broke me. I held the paper to my chest and cried, not out of sadness anymore, but because I finally felt her letting go. Her message wasn't about possessions. It was about what she saw in me, about how I showed up when it mattered. Meanwhile, news spread fast in our small town. People had their opinions, and Brianna didn't hold back on hers. She told anyone who would listen that I manipulated an old woman, took advantage of her fading mind, that I twisted a goodbye into a transaction. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. But the final blow came at Thanksgiving, when Aunt Linda invited the whole family to her house and left my name off the email chain. I only found out about the gathering through a mutual friend who assumed I'd be there. That stung more than the jewelry fight. It was like I'd become a ghost in my own family. All because I honored the truth. I didn't say anything to them. Instead, I spent Thanksgiving at Grandma's house with a small plate of stuffing, a slice of pumpkin pie, and her favorite jazz album playing low in the background. I toasted to her, and to every quiet act of love that gets overlooked. A few weeks later, on a snowy December morning, I got a call from a local museum. Grandma had donated several rare books years ago, and they were preparing an exhibit on legacy women of the Midwest. They asked if I'd be willing to speak on her behalf. I said yes when the night of the event arrived. I wore the pearl earrings she'd worn on her wedding day, tiny, classic, and full of history. As I stood on the small stage reading from her journals, I looked out and saw a few familiar faces, neighbors, old students from her days as a teacher, even the nurse who used to help with her medications. But not my family. Not Brianna. That was okay, because I wasn't standing there for them. I was standing for the woman who taught me how to sew a button, how to pray when I felt lost, how to speak up even when it felt easier to disappear. I was standing for Grandma. When the crowd applauded, I looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "You made me brave." The exhibit curator handed me a small package after the speech. It was wrapped in gold paper and tied with twine. "She asked us to give this to you if you ever came," he said. Inside was a photograph of us, me, age 10, sitting in her lap with a chocolate-streaked grin and a tiny envelope with a single word written in her neat cursive, "Forward." Inside the envelope, a key. The key was small and brass, warm to the touch, like it had been waiting for me all this time. No note, no explanation, just forward. The word rang in my head for days, heavy with mystery and promise. I searched every drawer, every cabinet, even old shoeboxes stashed in the attic, but found nothing it could unlock. Then, a week before Christmas, I remembered the cedar chest. It had always sat at the foot of Grandma's bed, carved with delicate vines and birds in flight. As a child, I thought it held magic like something out of a fairy tale. Grandma used to say, "That chest holds my beginnings and my ends." I'd assumed it was filled with old quills and family photos. Nothing extraordinary. But when I brought the key to its delicate silver lock, it clicked effortlessly. Like the chest had been holding its breath for this very moment. Inside was a collection of carefully preserved letters, newspaper clippings, photographs, and one blue velvet pouch. The letters were love notes between her and my grandfather, who had passed before I was born. I read one, written during their first Christmas apart, and felt the tears sting before I even got halfway through. "You are the hymn in my silence, the warmth in my winters if I never hold you again. Let this letter be the proof that I did once." Fully, and with every beat of my heart, I traced the ink with my fingers, overwhelmed by how deeply love could last even when people don't. Then I opened the velvet pouch. Inside was a brooch, gold, delicate, shaped like a bird mid-flight with tiny diamonds for eyes. I'd seen her wear it once, pinned to her coat during my high school graduation. Tucked beneath it was a handwritten note, dated 2 years before she passed, to Emma. "This piece belonged to my mother and to hers before that. It's not the most valuable by market, but it's the piece I treasured most. It made me feel strong when I was lonely. You reminded me of that strength every day you stayed beside me. Keep flying forward, sweetheart." I clutched the note, not even realizing I was crying until a tear dropped onto the paper. All this time, she had been preparing me not for grief, but for flight, for letting go of the weight of resentment and betrayal, for remembering that love often leaves its inheritance in invisible ways. That night, I couldn't sleep. I made hot cocoa, wrapped myself in the afghan she whereupon, and sat by the frosted window. Snow fell silently, each flake catching the porch light like little stars. I looked down at the brooch in my palm and thought of all the moments I could have walked away, but didn't. That's what made me different from Brianna. I didn't stay for recognition or rewards. I stayed for love, and now, love was showing up in return, not through diamonds or D's, but in the quiet knowing that I was never invisible to Grandma. A week later, I ran into Brianna at the grocery store. She looked surprised to see me, almost uncomfortable. She forced a polite smile and said, "Didn't expect to see you here." I returned the smile, calm and steady. "I live here, Bri." She shifted awkwardly, clearly hoping for a quick exit, but then her eyes landed on the bird brooch pinned to my coat. Her smile faltered. "That was Grandma's favorite," she said softly. I nodded, yes. She left it for me, for the first time. She didn't argue. She didn't smirk or belittle. She just stood there in the cereal aisle, blinking like she might cry. "Guess she really did love you the most," she whispered. It wasn't meant kindly, but it didn't hurt me either, because I didn't need to be the favorite. I just needed to be someone who loved her fully, and was loved back in the quiet, unspoken ways that mattered more than gold ever could. I walked away from that aisle lighter than I had in months. Outside, the snow had started falling again, soft and slow. I tipped my head up toward the sky and let it land on my lashes, smiling. Christmas was coming, and somehow, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. Christmas Day arrived, with a sky dusted in gold and pink, the kind of morning Grandma used to call heaven's tablecloth. The town was quiet, wrapped in a hush only snow can bring. I lit the fireplace in her house, my house now, technically, and brewed her favorite cinnamon coffee, the one she used to insist tasted like Christmas memories. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at her old ornaments box beside me. Each one had a story. A tiny wooden reindeer Grandpa carved during the war. A porcelain angel with a chipped wing Grandma refused to replace because broken wings still fly. There was even a glittery green ball with my name painted on it, in a 7-year-old's wobbly handwriting. I opened the box slowly, reverently. Decorating without her felt like walking on a tightrope over grief, but I owed her this. I owed myself this. With each ornament I hung, I remembered her voice, her laughter, her warmth when she'd squeeze my hand and say, "Emma, you are enough, always." Halfway through, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mom. "Come over. If you want, your cousin's here. She brought the baby. No pressure, no pressure." That's what families say when they really mean pressure. But don't say we pressured you. I stared at the message for a while. Then I looked at the brooch pinned to my sweater. I wasn't angry anymore, not really. But I also wasn't ready to sit across the table from Brianna like nothing happened still. Something about Grandma's words, "keep flying forward," echoed through my mind. What if flying forward meant not letting the past shrink my world? What if forgiveness wasn't about letting her off the hook, but setting myself free? So, I bundled up, gathered a tin of the sugar cookies I'd baked from Grandma's recipe, and walked 2 blocks to my parents' house. The living room was full of chatter and baby giggles. Brianna sat near the tree, her newborn cradled in her arms. Her husband laughing with my dad over a football game. She saw me and froze, her mouth opening slightly like she couldn't decide whether to smile or apologize. Hey, I said simply, holding out the cookie tin. She blinked. You came? I did. Mom jumped in, grateful for the neutral energy. Emma brought Grandma's cookies. Brianna stood and walked toward me. She looked tired, Mom, tired and different, softer. Or maybe I was just seeing her clearly. For the first time. I wasn't expecting you, she said. I wasn't sure I'd come. I replied honestly. We stood there, awkward, old tension wrapped around us like static. She shifted her weight and looked down at her baby. I named her Grace, she said, almost shyly after Grandma's middle name. I nodded, surprised by the lump in my throat. She would have liked that. Brianna finally met my eyes. I'm sorry, Emma, for how it all went down. I know I didn't deserve what she gave me, and you deserved more. The brooch felt heavier on my sweater, not in a burdensome way, but like a steady hand on my shoulder. It's not about what we deserved, I said. It's about what we gave. I gave her time, love, presence. You gave her peace in her final days. Maybe that was enough for her to love us both differently but fully. She looked like she wanted to cry. And maybe I did too. The moment wasn't perfect. It wasn't wrapped in a bow or fixed with a hug. But it was a beginning. Later, as I walked home under the Christmas lights, my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. Hi Emma, this is Jana. I'm the lawyer who handled your grandmother's estate. There's one more thing she wanted you to have. Can you come by the office next week? I stared at the message, heart racing. One more thing. As the snow fell around me, I whispered aloud to the stars. What did you leave me this time? Grandma. And deep down, I already knew. Whatever it was, it would be exactly what I needed. The week between Christmas and New Year's always had this strange, floaty feeling like the year was holding its breath, waiting to either let go or dig in deeper. The morning I went to Jeanette's office, the sky was gray with soft flurries and the streets were half frozen. I pulled my scarf tighter around my neck and clutched the paper with the address scrawled in Grandma's writing, curvy cursive, always with a little heart over the I in my name. Jeanette's office was nestled between a bakery and a tailor, the kind of small-town law firm with worn leather chairs, wood-paneled walls, and the faint smell of coffee and dust. The receptionist looked up, smiled politely, and led me to a small conference room. Jana walked in with a kind smile, and a file folder hugged to her chest. She was maybe in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and glasses that made her look more like a librarian than a lawyer. Emma, thank you for coming. I nodded. You said there was something left? Yes. She opened the folder, flipped past some documents, then reached for a small velvet pouch from a drawer. She placed it in front of me, then set a sealed envelope beside it. Your grandmother left specific instructions. She wanted you to have this directly, not mailed, not mentioned to anyone else. I stared at the pouch. It was deep burgundy with a braided gold drawstring. Something about it made my hands tremble as I picked it up. Inside was a locket. Not just any locket, the locket. It was gold oval, slightly tarnished, with tiny hand-engraved vines curling along the edge. I remembered sitting on Grandma's lap at age 6, begging to open it. She never let me. She'd always say, one day, sweetheart, when you're ready. The locket clicked open in my hand. Inside was a tiny photo of me and her, taken during my 8th grade graduation. I was all braces and awkward bangs, but Grandma had her arm wrapped tight around my shoulders, proud and radiant. On the other side of the locket was something unexpected, a note. So tiny and precise, it must have taken her forever to write. You were my joy, my everyday. This locket holds you close, just like my heart always did. I couldn't stop the tears. Jana quietly slid over a box of tissues. There's more, she said gently. I picked up the envelope. It was addressed in Grandma's familiar handwriting. To Emma, when I'm gone but you're still glowing. Inside, a letter. My darling Emma, if you're reading this, then I'm wherever the angels eat peppermint fudge and play bingo on Sundays. Don't you dare cry too hard. I know how you get. I didn't give you the jewelry because you don't need shiny things to know your worth. But I didn't forget you, sweetheart. I left you something better. That locket, it's not just a keepsake. It's a reminder that you are always seen, always loved. The safe deposit box key is inside the velvet pouch. Everything in it holds photos, some savings I tucked away. A few handwritten journals. Are all yours. You were my shadow and my sunshine. My reason to fight the hard days and sing through the good ones. And Emma, never dim your light for anyone again. You gave me more comfort in my last year than gold or gems ever could. Love you always. Grandma Janae sat there, stunned. Not because of money or heirlooms or even the key, but because I doubted. I'd spent days after the will wondering if I'd meant less to her. If love could be measured by diamonds, The love had been written in the locket, the letter, the memory she left behind in her own quiet, private way. She didn't need to broadcast her love. She lived it. When I got home, I opened the velvet pouch again. Sure enough, tucked in a tiny flap, was a brass key with a tag labeled boxed 137. Later that week, I visited the bank. The deposit box held no treasure in the traditional sense, no rubies, no emeralds. But it held everything I didn't know I needed, stacks of letters I'd written her over the years, folded carefully. Photos of us through every season of my life, a handmade quilt with my name stitched into it, one square for every month I stayed with her, and in a small envelope labeled "For when you doubt your worth," a note, "You gave me time." That's the greatest gift of all. I held that envelope to my chest and finally let go of every ounce of resentment, comparison, and disappointment. I'd been looking for recognition in a will, but what Grandma left me couldn't be written on paper or appraised by value. She left me her heart. The first time I saw the quilt in the deposit box, I couldn't stop running my fingers across the fabric. Each square held a memory I'd long forgotten. December had a tiny snowflake, stitched from silver thread like the day we drank hot cocoa after shoveling the driveway together. April's patch had a daffodil, her favorite flower, which I used to place on her nightstand every spring morning. July, a tiny embroidered American flag, because I'd once wheeled her down to the park so she could watch the fireworks from the senior section. She cried that night and told me this may be my last 4th of July, and I had dismissed her with a smile. I didn't want to believe it then, but she knew. That woman always knew. Each square was a story in thread. She had been sewing it all along, quietly. During the year I lived with her, while I prepped her medication or made her oatmeal, she was stitching gratitude into cloth, 1 month at a time. I just hadn't noticed. And now, I couldn't unsee it. The journals in the box were even more intimate, pages filled with her handwriting. Not all sweet. Some days she wrote about her pain, about being tired, about missing Grandpa. Other entries were surprisingly funny. She called the neighbor's cat Lucifer in fur, and once wrote a rant about how daytime television was rotting her brain. But on many pages my name appeared like a soft echo. Emma brought me soup today, chicken noodle. Not too salty. She knows I hate bland food. Emma tucked me in and kissed my forehead like I was a child. Maybe I am now. Emma read me poetry tonight. I don't think she noticed I cried a little. Emma told me I wasn't a burden. That meant everything. I wasn't just her caretaker. I was her person. And she had captured our time together with more love than any gemstone could ever express. When I left the bank that afternoon, I felt lighter. Not because I had closure. Grief doesn't work that way. But because I had clarity. I'd been chasing validation in the wrong places. I thought the will was a final statement of how much she loved me. But at WASN single quotes T.love, as it turns out, isn't always announced. Sometimes it's tucked into a drawer, sewn into a quilt, scribbled into journal margins. A week later, I bumped into Claire. She was at a local coffee shop, laughing loudly, dressed head to toe in designer clothes, flashing Grandma's ruby ring. It caught the light like it always had to. Bold, too. Red like a stop sign. When she saw me, her face froze for a moment. Then she forced a smile and walked over. "Hey, Emma," she said, tilting her head like I was a stranger she was trying to please. "Claire, listen. I heard you got something too. I mean, Grandma left stuff for both of us, right?" She asked it like she wanted confirmation, like she hoped she wasn't the only one. Blessed. I looked at her, really looked at her. She didn't visit. She didn't stay up through the coughing fits. She didn't rub lotion on cracked hands or refill pill boxes, or tell stories to make Grandma forget about chemo for a few minutes. But she got the jewelry. And maybe that was enough for her. "Yeah," I said softly. "She left me the best part of her." Claire blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" I smiled. "Her stories, her time, her trust." Claire nodded slowly, clearly not getting it, then shrugged. "Cool. Anyway, gotta run. Kyle's waiting outside." As she turned away, I looked down at the locket around my neck. It didn't sparkle like the ring, but it glowed with something deeper. Truth. That night, I hung the quilt on my bedroom wall, not just as decoration, but as a reminder of who I'd been. Who she helped me become. I wasn't just Grandma's caretaker. I was her legacy. And no legal document could ever take that from me. Christmas came around faster than I expected. It was the first one without Grandma. The house felt different, quieter, colder. Even though the heat was on, I decorated the way she liked it. Red ribbons on the banister, pine-scented candles flickering in the corners, and Bing Crosby playing low on vinyl. But something was missing. That laugh. That humming she did when she was stirring hot chocolate. The way she used to sit in her recliner with a crocheted blanket over her knees, pretending not to fall asleep during Christmas movies. I stared at the empty chair for a long time that morning. Then I got up, grabbed the quilt, and wrapped it around my shoulders. It still smelled faintly of lavender and cinnamon, her scent. I sat by the fireplace with a cup of tea, and opened one of her journals. There, in her slanted, familiar handwriting, was an entry dated exactly 1 year ago, Christmas Eve. Emma Strung out the lights today, and they twinkled like magic. I asked her to play the old Christmas records, and she danced around the kitchen like she was 5 again. I couldn't stop smiling. She reminds me that love lives in small things. That joy doesn't require fanfare, just warmth, presents, and maybe a peppermint cookie. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear landed on the page. This was her gift, not the absence of pain or the presence of wealth, but these moments she had tucked away in secret for me to find later. Like emotional time capsules, that evening I invited my parents over. My younger brother, too. We had dinner like Grandma would have wanted: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, her cranberry orange stuffing that only I knew how to make now. When dessert came, I brought out the journals and passed one to each of them. They were hesitant at first until they opened the pages. Mom gasped softly. Dad wiped his glasses. My brother chuckled at a funny note she had written about him stealing the last piece of pie years ago. Suddenly, we weren't mourning anymore, we were remembering. Later that night, when everyone left, I got one final surprise. A small envelope had slid out of one of the journals. Inside was a faded photo of me as a baby, asleep in Grandma's arms. And she was looking down at me with that same expression I remembered from childhood, complete and total love. On the back, in her handwriting, was a note: if you're reading this, then I'm probably gone. But I need you to know, Emma, you were never a second choice. You were my favorite chapter, my biggest joy and my peace. Thank you for holding my hand at the end, just like I held yours at the beginning. I love you, always. I pressed the photo to my chest and sat in silence. There had been so many nights I wondered if I did enough, if she knew how much I loved her. But now I knew. She knew. And I realized something: the jewelry, the money, the legal boxes, those were just things. Easily taken, easily forgotten. But the love I received, that stayed, that grew, that bloomed. Even in grief, a few months later, Claire reached out again. She said she was decluttering and offered to return one of Grandma's brooches. I thanked her but declined because I already had what mattered most: love sewn into a quilt, memories inked in margins. And a bond that not even death could unravel. As I closed the last journal, I whispered, "Merry Christmas, Grandma," and for the first time since she passed, I felt her smile. Somewhere, somehow, I knew she was saying it back.